shoot the question in the chat room, and we will address it here on the air. Okay. Every 10 minutes, I have to take a quick break to just identify what we're doing, and because my videographer's paid every 10 minutes, so the more breaks I take, the better she's paid. Anyway, so let's let's get back to that, if you would. The song.
The
Paul Anka.
The Paul Anka song was written in French.
Right.
And then he fell in love with the song. I don't know too much about Paul, like I do Frank, but I really commend him on the wonderful job he did on those lyrics. You know, it became Frank's signature song, like New York, New York is today. And I love the fact that Let Me Try Again is the beginning of his second career.
But what year was that?
1969.
1969.
And when you hear the lyrics, they will definitely impress you. Wonderfully done.
Well, why did Frank quit the first time? I remember that he had a voice problem.
Actually, he was in love with Ava Gardner, and she kept running to Spain, and it killed him. You know, he was terrible. He's a wonderful parent. Was a wonderful parent, and very good to Nancy all his life. And if you get the Treasures of Frank Sinatra, it's in Barnes & Noble right now, and at the post office as part of the memorabilia that the family released after he passed. Get the Treasures of Frank Sinatra, and you will hear a lot of what I'm saying, okay, about this wonderful gentleman. So he was a very good parent, but he was in love with David Gardner. You know, love is love. How do you stop love? And that was his inspiration to do many, many songs, which we'll get into at another time.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Looking forward to it.
So why the decision? Your original list was going from 10. Now you're gonna have 12 cuts on the new CD, correct? Or
yeah, I just thought that these two other songs that I'm adding to it were very important, and I'm gonna just save those as a surprise.
Sounds like a plan to us. Tony, will it stop at 12?
It'll stop at 12.
Okay. Yeah. And about, what is that, about 45 minutes to an hour?
Exactly. It's going to be about 45 to 50 minutes.
That's a great length for a CD. I sometimes find listening to the ones that go an hour and 20 minutes, I get a little tired.
In fact, I was with the artist over the phone today. They're doing the graphics now. It's going to be beautifully done. My story, a little bit of my story, plus the picture of me, and we're going to do some original things.
Cool.
And we don't want to be boring.
No.
Can't wait for that signature copy, Phillips. I'll tell you that.
Exactly. Just no putting it on eBay. That's all.
No.
All right. When we were last all together, we were kind of wrapping up your experience in Hawaii, right? The equivalent to the Grammys out there, but you had a story. You had something about Don Costa that you wanted to kind of blossom a little more.
You know, at my age, sometimes I kind of drift off a little bit.
Yes, we call it CRS.
Can't remember stuff.
Stuff.
Anyway, Don Costa did the arrangement for Don Hope,
Right.
for Tiny Bones,
Really.
and Sonny Burke was the gentleman who wrote the song. I just want to mention that because it's such a coincidence, because Don I loved so much. He was like my uncle. I can say that readily, and because I spent a lot of time with him. And in fact, one night when he took me backstage to be with Frank at Caesar's Palace, I didn't want to put this in the show tonight, but I will. One night he took me backstage, and that night his mother was flying in from Palm Springs. And that night I will never forget. That was the night that his mom flew and hit the mountain.
Oh boy.
And I was there at that moment, and I'll never forget that evening.
Wow.
Nor will anybody else in the audience.
Mm.
Right? He took a helicopter right out, or a private plane, I don't know, he took it and searched the mountains and so forth. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
And when was this? Roughly?
I forget exactly when that was. I don't want to quote something that's not exact precisely, but it had to be about 15 years ago, ballpark.
Okay. Roughly.
Ballpark.
Sure.
Don't quote me, folks.
Yeah.
There's that little slippage going on right now.
Wow. If you could, I couldn't imagine at that moment getting getting notified of something like
So
that.
these little tidbits of living my life the way I have, from shiny shoes in New York City to telling everybody in the military that I was a professional singer when I wasn't, and then they put me in special service instead of supply records so I could sing to the troops. These little things I am blessed with. Who can speak about these wonderful people living the life that I've led over the past 50 years, and I thank you for this opportunity.
It takes me back to a time that I didn't really experience. I mean, but yet I know all the players because that genre was always in my house growing up, and it's kind of neat to kind of fill it in from behind.
It's amazing the longevity of Mr. Sinatra's career. It goes way back to most of the infants even today because of their parents being such admirers of the giant, of the chairman of the board.
Don Ho, I want to go back. I have a question just associated, and some of our listeners may not be familiar with that. If you take the status of Don Ho from Hawaii, who would be his equivalent in the United States in terms of stature in entertainment?
Well, Don Ho was definitely the king of Hawaii. Before Don, it was Al Apaka.
Okay.
Alfred Apaka. And Jeff Apaka, his son, like my son is doing, took his reins, and he was always at the Royal Hawaiian, and the women were in love with Mr. Apaka. But Don was the new generation, and he came up very handsome and charismatic and sang like Barry Como, and et cetera, et cetera. But even more far-reaching than Mr. Como was one of our greatest voices of all time. But I told you he was underrated because most people wanted him to sing Tiny Bubbles in Polynesia, and he really wanted to do Kui Lee's songs, who was one of the greatest composers of all time. To this day, they have the Kui Lee Cancer Fund and benefit every single year because of
Don Ho.
Don Ho and his family.
So who would be his equivalent in the mainland for somebody to understand his stature in Hawaii?
Don Ho was king of Hawaii.
Right, but here in the States, who would have been his equivalent?
Absolutely,
Frank.
Sinatra.
Frank? Okay.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So he was to Hawaii when Frank was here.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody would go to Hawaii for the most part
Sure.
and not put him down as one of the priorities to see. He was wonderful to everyone. Every time I brought a star over there, I don't know how many stars to Hawaii, from Johnny Mathis to Glenn Campbell to Tina Turner, on and on.
Sure.
I don't remember the amount of people I brought over there, but I brought them over for 10 years straight. He always said, "Tony, come on in." Always had a table for us up front, and always went backstage and played snooker with him and the star. And we all ended up with Don, Johnny Mathis, and I just shooting snooker or whatever
Right.
we was doing at that time. It was
Wow.
a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Wow. Interesting.
Fabulous.
Do you know what that game is?
Yeah, I know stuff.
What is it?
I don't know.
Snooker is miniature pool.
It's that little
It's a
thing.
short game.
Yeah, it's a very little short game.
All right, you know what I'd like to do at that point then is let's stop right there because we're right up against our first break already. First segment is in the books. When we come back on the other side, we're going to ask Tony a question that we talked about last night on the show. Be interested in getting his take on it.
Always like that, too.
And then we're going to premiere, which song are we going to do first? What Now My Love, is that correct? We'll do that first?
Please.
All right, when we come back on the other side, we'll hear Tony's answer to our question. We're going to hear What Now My Love. You're listening to Tony Martini, My 50-Year Journey on LVRocks.com. We'll be back right after this.